Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Find the Intersection. My name is Paul Dezay, and today we're going to be talking about the New Testament passage, 1 Corinthians 15, 1 to 11. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 to 11. One of the things that I encourage everyone to do is to read the Bible version or read the text, 1 Corinthians 15, 1 to 11, in a couple translations. And that way you kind of get a more well-rounded idea of what the author is trying to say to the group of people he's trying to say. Hey, Brian, how are you, man? Today we're going to be talking about that. Now, the context for this passage is Paul is talking to a divided church. This church has a lot of problems. Hey, Barry. And as we've kind of rolled through here over the last couple months, we've been in 1 Corinthians. And so he's speaking about unity, speaking about the body. He's speaking about coming together with their spiritual gifts. And in this particular church that he's writing to, there's a lot of people who doubt the resurrection, doubt the bodily resurrection. They think the resurrection is kind of a spiritual deal. And Paul, through chapter 15, is really talking about the resurrection of Jesus really happened in the flesh. And then we will experience a bodily resurrection in the future. So it's important for the context. And so a few things that jumped out to me today in this text is, number one, Paul emphasizes the good news of the death and the resurrection of Jesus. The good news is the death, which brings the forgiveness of sins, and the resurrection from the dead, which brings us the physical resurrection. So that's what Paul defines the good news. So if you ever, if somebody asks you what's the gospel, what's the good news, it's the death and the resurrection of Jesus, which brings us new life. And the second thing that I saw was a repetition of the phrase according to the scriptures, according to the scriptures, death, forgiveness of sin according to the scriptures, and then the resurrection according to the scriptures. So Paul, by saying that phrase according to the scriptures twice, is trying to let us know that everything that Jesus, the good news, everything about Jesus was written in the scriptures. It's part of the story of Israel. So it's important. The reason why we study the scriptures is because we see that story of Israel, and then Jesus, and then us as the church. And then what we do is we find ourselves in that story. And so I'm a big believer that the Old Testament matters because it sets the stage as part of the story. And Paul would emphasize that as well by saying according to the scriptures twice. Anyway, so that's the reason we do this. So it's the reason that you're doing it, is because it's part of the gospel. And then the third thing is really Paul's ministry. Paul is criticized often about not being a real apostle. And so in the second half of this text, he really talks about how he is an apostle, that he witnessed the resurrection of Jesus, that Jesus appeared to him, as well as 500 people. And even though his time was later, he referenced that, he still is an apostle. So he's trying to bring credibility to what he's doing. He says he works harder than anybody, but it's really all about grace. And so Paul is an apostle to the Gentile. Now, this is really about Paul's calling, in which that connects to what we talked about yesterday when Jesus called Peter, James, and John. So calling is definitely a big part of this. And so the application for me is that I have to be reminded, though, even though I work hard, that it's really by God's grace that any fruit comes. It's not by my work. And so I need to trust in Jesus, as well as we all do, that as we work and do the kingdom work, that it's his grace that is working and that allows us to participate in it, that we're called into, just like Paul is called, just like Peter, James, and John were called. You and I are called as well. So that's it. That's what I got for today. I'm very curious to what you found in the scriptures. I encourage you to share your comments and let us know what you got so we can learn together. This isn't about just me. This is about all of us experiencing the scriptures and allowing the Spirit to allow us to learn from one another. So I encourage you to do that. If you are crazy like me and want to do a Facebook Live video, do it. I'd love to hear you share your thoughts. Again, the idea of community here is important. So, hey, thanks for listening, Brian and Barry and whoever listens later. We appreciate you very much. And I'll see you tomorrow and we get into Isaiah, the Old Testament passage. Grace and peace, everyone.